Hey guys, I'm Whitney, a personal injury attorney on a mission to help you make safer and more informed decisions about beauty. After representing women harmed by dangerous cosmetic products and procedures, I have realized that the beauty industry is full of dangerous risks and side effects that are unknown and not talked about enough. On each episode, we'll dive into all the latest beauty trends and discuss how we can stay safe in a sea of potions and procedures promising youth and beauty. We will explore real-life stories, legal insights, and advice from the experts. From Botox to BBLs to toxic products in your makeup bag, we're going to talk about it all. My goal is for you to leave every episode with the information that you need to stay safe, beautiful, and informed. You're listening to the Beauty Justice Podcast. Hey guys, welcome to today's episode of the Beauty Justice Podcast. I am so excited for my guest today. I have here with me Louiza Tarassova, who is a friend, a fellow attorney, and also an advocate for safer beauty. She runs her own practice out of Winter Park, Florida, and she handles cases all throughout the state. Her practice is focused on cosmetic-related procedure injury cases. And I have learned a lot from her, and she has a lot of great information that she's going to share with us today. We are going to be talking about CoolSculpting and also unlicensed practice of medicine in med spas, which is something that she sees a lot in her practice. So without further ado, welcome to the show, Louiza. I'm so excited for you to be here today.
I'm so excited that you're doing this, Whitney. I think we really need this. I think this is a really good thing that you're doing. You're serving a lot of men and women by spreading out the information.
Yeah, this is something that I know I've been talking about doing. I've been talking with you saying that I was going to do this for a long time. So I finally have been able to launch the podcast, and I'm really excited to have you on here as a guest today. Yay! So I want to talk today about a couple of different things, but one topic that I know you are super knowledgeable about is CoolSculpting. Can you just tell us a little bit about CoolSculpting for people who don't know? What is CoolSculpting? You know, how does it work? What is it supposed to do? And what are some of the risks that we should know about this procedure?
Yeah, so this is a really popular procedure. I remember myself seeing advertisements for it and billboards starting maybe in 2015 and 2016. It was just coming up. And essentially, the big claim, the big promise is that it's going to reduce your fat without you really doing anything. You go into like a med spa and you get this machine attached to you. It cools down your tissue. And the idea is that your fat cells start dying off on their own months later. Unfortunately, it is not as good as it seems, like anything else. One of the biggest and most serious, and I would say life-altering side effects of this device is called paradoxical adipose hyperplasia. And that is essentially the opposite effect of what this procedure promises to do. So instead of reducing your fat, it grows the area that bothers you the most, that hardens it, it turns it into a mass. And then the only way to remove it is through plastic surgery. And a lot of people are saying, I've had multiple reconstructive surgeries after I developed this disfigurement post CoolSculpting, and I still can't get rid of it. I think that is one of the most important things that people should realize about this, miracle device.
Wow. Yeah. I also remember, seeing all of the ads and everything for CoolSculpting when it first came out. I actually had CoolSculpting done. I was trying to think the other day of what year that had to have been. I mean, it was probably like 10 years ago or something. But, just you see the marketing everywhere, and it's oh, come in on your lunch break, we're going to freeze your fat, it's going to shrink this area. The before and after pictures that they show you are like, whoa, that's great, and I don't have to have surgery, I don't have to have any downtime. It's a really easy sell. I think I just did one session of it and I didn't see any results, and then I didn't do any more. Of course, it's a situation where they tell you that you need to then buy a package of like multiple and keep coming back over and over again before you can actually see these results. But I actually know many, many people who have done that and didn't see the results that they were promised. Finding out that something like this that may be right for some ideal, very small, portion of candidates, um, finding out that it can possibly have this side effect that does the complete opposite of what it's supposed to do, I think it's really, really shocking. And I know for certain that nobody told me about that when I went in to have this done. And some of the people that I've talked to, that have had multiple rounds of CoolSculpting, that have, just seen posts that I've done on social media or whatever about CoolSculpting, same reaction. What? Like, I didn't know that this could happen. Nobody told me about this. So you ended up involved in some litigation with the manufacturer of the CoolSculpting machine, right?
Yeah, we had a client come in. This was back in like late 2018. And he said, listen, at the time, I didn't know anything about paradoxical hyperplasia. There wasn't much information online about it. The manufacturer had been unnoticed about it. It knew that it had this problem with the device. But everything online, when you would look up cool sculpting, it was very positive. And so he too was shocked when this mass began to grow at the treatment sites where the cool sculpting machine was applied to his body. He was shocked to find out that it's growing. First, he thought maybe I'm gaining weight in those areas. I mean, those areas were bothering me anyway. And then he's like exercising more and dieting more, following a very strict diet, really vigilantly trying to get rid of those areas, and they're not going away. And so he started doing more of an in-depth research about it, and also called the provider that did the procedure on him and said, please see me. I need to talk to you about something's going on with my body. And the provider was kind of like, they were very shady about the whole situation. I will say this, and I hear this a lot from people with the same problem. When he went back to complain, the nurse practitioner that did the procedure on him was like, let me have the supervising physician look at you. And the supervising physician came in, looked at him very quickly, didn't say much, said, you have paradoxical hyperplasia, and left the room. And so my client was like, I don't know what this means for me. So he started doing some research, found like a little medical scholarly article about it, and realized he needs surgery. And he came to me just kind of really upset that this had happened to him, and really upset that, one, no one told him at the clinic about it. No one warned him about this risk. But two, like, why wasn't this a bigger deal? Why is this cool sculpting device so popular, and there's so much good information about it online, and there's not a lot of warnings by the manufacturer about our device can also be very dangerous, so you should know before you proceed. So we did end up litigating against the manufacturer. Our claim in the lawsuit, and this was federal court, we said that, look, the manufacturer's warnings to the providers, to the doctors they're selling these devices to, should be more clear. It should be more specific. Remember, this is a condition, I'm not sure if a lot of people realize, but it did not exist and does not exist without the cool sculpting device. So the cool sculpting device is what causes this condition. It was not known before the cool sculpting device came on the market. So the manufacturer was in the best position, according to our claims, right? This is what we believed, to warn the world about, this is what we know. This is what is being reported to us. And unfortunately, the court said, no, the manufacturer fulfilled their duty by inserting a 2-line vague description that, hey, by the way, paradoxical hyperplasia is an adverse effect, among many others. And now the duty's on the providers who are selling these procedures directly to the consumers to discuss with them what they feel they need to discuss about the adverse effect.
So this is interesting because I actually just had a conversation with an attorney named Ray Chester who took some lawsuits against Allergan, the manufacturer of Botox, and we just had a discussion about the whole idea that a manufacturer makes a product, and then when you have this sort of intermediary person in between the manufacturer of the product and then the end user of the product, the manufacturer can sort of put it off on this intermediary person and say, oh, well, we warned you, we gave you all the information. Now it's your responsibility to relay that information to the end user of the product. But what you're saying is that the manufacturer of the CoolSculpting machine, they were not giving the proper information to the intermediary here, which would be the medical providers who are ultimately the ones that are giving out these treatments.
Right. I think that's the biggest problem with a lot of these cosmetic procedures, products, and devices, right? If you look at the chain of how the device or the product ends up in the consumer's body or on the consumer's body, the manufacturer will create a solution to a problem, right? With a device or a product. That device and product, they're not infallible, they're not perfect. They can have side effects that are very serious. However, the manufacturer just invested millions of dollars into getting this device or product on the market, getting it approved or cleared by the FDA. And there's a whole other thing we can discuss about how the FDA clears devices. But essentially, the manufacturer wants to push the product along as smoothly as possible and not raise any red flags or raise any concerns, because now they need that money back from what they just invested. And then their sales reps go out and try to convince med spas and doctors and nurse practitioners, et cetera, who's ever doing it in your state, that these products are solve a problem and they create a big profit margin for you because it's brand new. Customers are going to be into it. The manufacturer is also directly marketing these prescription only devices and products to consumers. So they're like, don't worry, your patients are going to be coming in asking for this, asking for CoolSculpting or asking for a specific brand of a filler or a neurotoxin. And so there's a disconnect there. The manufacturer is not incentivized to tell providers the real truth of how dangerous their products or devices can be. And the providers are very trusting of these manufacturers. They're like, of course, a rep would tell me if their device would have any issues. And that's not the fact. The fact is that doctors and nurse practitioners have their own responsibility to do independent research, independent of what the manufacturer's claims are, to understand if they're safe and effective for their patients. And unfortunately, what I see in my practice on a daily basis is that homework is not being done by the providers. So there's definitely a responsibility there on the providers, right? You can't just believe everything a manufacturer tells you. They want to sell you this product.
So, can you tell us what you learned in terms of, how often the manufacturers of the Cool Sculpting machine, like how often or how rare did they think that this PAH side effect was at the time, and what were they telling the people that they were selling these machines to?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question because that was another aspect of the case, right? Not only were we claiming that there was not enough information being provided to the doctors that were purchasing these devices, therefore, we were saying they couldn't possibly reasonably advise their own patients of the risks, right? Because they didn't know enough information. But they were also under the impression that it was super rare. And that was a big point of contention because the manufacturer actually of CoolSculpting didn't really come out and say what the incidence rate of PH or PAH was. They kind of always were vague about that, but there was an article in 2014 that was put out by a paid consultant that had worked as an advisor for the CoolSculpting manufacturer. And so he presented this information about paradoxical hyperplasia. He published a scholarly article announcing this brand new medical condition associated with cryolipolysis, he said, which is the underlying technology of CoolSculpting. CoolSculpting was the only device on the market that did cryolipolysis, but CoolSculpting wasn't really mentioned in the article. However, he cited a super rare rate in that article. And from then on, other providers or doctors who wanted to find out what the rate was, they would look to that article and recite that incidence rate, which was not correct. So, what we discovered through our litigation, what I actually asked in a deposition, I asked the corporate representative of the manufacturer of CoolSculpting, I said, what was, according to your calculations, the incidence rate? And she said something much higher. And I said, what about this article that was put out by a paid consultant, by an advisor for you guys at the time? Did you realize or know that he was misstating the incidence rate? And she said, I don't know anything about that. But had he checked with me, I would have told him the correct incidence rate. And it was left at that. So essentially, what we know is, there's an incorrect incidence rate that's super rare published and it's allowed to be out there. And people are citing it and quoting it and misinforming other people down the line. And the manufacturer was just sitting quietly and they were happy with that incidence rate because that's not what they had calculated internally.
Wow. In terms of, the incidence rate, I know there was a study that I saw that came out last year. I think it was the New York Times that published this study that they did, or an internal kind of investigation on cool sculpting and on this very topic, and the incidence rate of PAH. And I'm curious, did that come out during while you were still involved, in the middle of this case, or did that come out after?
So at the time, our case was under appeal. We were appealing to a higher court, basically asking them to reverse the decision of the lower court and allow us to take this case to trial, allow us to present the evidence that we had to a jury, and allow them, not the judge, to make a decision. So we were under appeal. We weren't doing much. We had submitted our documents and we're just waiting. But yeah, I know that the New York Times did their own investigation. It took them quite a while to interview many people and look into many documents. And I know that there's also scholarly articles written by independent plastic surgeons and people who maybe have owned the cool sculpting device in their practices who said, listen, according to our own clinical experience, the incidence rate is a lot higher than what is being cited by the manufacturer or their consultants. So essentially, the incidence rates that I have seen in the medical literature were from anywhere from 1%. One plastic surgeon commented that he thinks it's as high as 10% because not every pH
Wow.
um, event is very obvious. So, what happens to the tissue is essentially it is like a wound healing process. In some people, and they don't know why, but when that applicator is applied to your skin and your tissue and it freezes the fat, some people's bodies react to it in a negative way and they want to create scar tissue. And it can appear in many different forms. Some people have the mass in basically an applicator shape where it's like a rectangle. Other people grow, like I've seen women, they look pregnant. Their entire abdomen kind of blows up. However, what this plastic surgeon was commenting is that he believes there are some cases where it's not obvious, it's not an obvious mass, but it's still fibrous scar-like tissue that you can never like reduce with diet and exercise. So it's still pH. And so many people may not even realize they've developed it because it's not a huge mass. So he thinks it's as high as 10%.
There's a big difference between 1% and 10%. In terms of the actual numbers that the manufacturer was putting out, do you know off the top of your head, was it like a one in
Yeah, one of the
some
first
odd thousand, or
Yeah, one of the first incidence rates that you can find online from like 2014 was 1 in 20,000. And there was a big question of 1 in 20,000 what? 20,000 patients or 20,000 procedures, cycles, right? Because on one patient, you can undergo 10 cool sculpting cycles. And how do you calculate an incidence or an event of pH? Because you can develop in every single area that you had cool sculpting done. So the big question is, what is your formula? Are you counting one person as one pH event, but you're counting all the cycles that you ever sold, right? That's different. You're not comparing apples to apples here. You're comparing apples to oranges. You have to either say it's one person is going to get pH for every number of people that underwent CoolSculpting, regardless of how many cycles each person underwent, or you have to count every incidence, every event of pH per every cycle that was applied to their body, right? Has to be the same. And so there's a lot of, funny math that happens with these statistics.
Yeah, wow. And I think, and I don't quote me on this, but I feel like the New York Times article mentioned numbers more in line with like 1 in 3,000, or some doctors thought that it would be as high as like 1 in 1,000. So there's a huge difference when we're talking about 1 in 20,000 versus 1 in 3,000 versus 1 in 1,000. And that's information that, as a patient, I would want to know that. I would want to know if I have a 1 in 1,000 chance or a 1 in 20,000 chance. That's something that I would want to know so that I could take that into consideration on, are the potential benefits of this procedure worth this really horrific risk. For people that haven't seen or heard about this story, there's a supermodel, Linda Evangelista. She came out in recent years and really publicly shared her story about how she underwent CoolSculpting in lots of different areas on her body and developed this condition. And I mean, it really ruined her life. Um, so if you want to learn a little more about that, you can definitely go Google and kind of read about what happened to her. What is the current status? So your case went up on appeal. What ultimately was the outcome of your case against the manufacturer of CoolSculpting?
Yeah, so the federal court said, listen, it's not the fault of the manufacturer that nobody knew what pH was, that consumers were not warned by their providers. Essentially, in America, the manufacturers of products and devices are very much protected, in that they have to just minimally notify the providers, the healthcare providers to whom they're selling these devices, and their duty is essentially discharged. It's now on the providers to do their own research or to be cautious of new technology, I suppose, and kind of wait for the data to come in. With pH, it took several years for all of this to come out. And you mentioned Linda Evangelista's case. I will say that her bravery and her courage in coming out publicly, and maybe a little bit of an annoyance factor there, that the manufacturer was not doing the right thing in her case, but that is what brought to light this very serious issue that thousands of men and women were dealing with alone prior to her coming out. As soon as she went public about it, the media became very interested in it because it's CoolSculpting so popular. And then all these people, I'm in contact with so many people that have pH from CoolSculpting that can't get rid of it with surgeries. And they said to me, listen, it wasn't until I saw her on the news or in a magazine article that I realized that what I have is from CoolSculpting. That bulge that I can't get rid of is from CoolSculpting that I had gotten back in 2016 or 2014. But yeah, I think that there is a huge problem in this country with where do you go for an honest, independent source of information about these products? The manufacturer's not incentivized, and they don't, I guess, have to put out on their website, these are all the horrible things that will happen to you. That's against the interest of what they're there for, is to make money. Doctors should try to find out more information, or try to think critically. Is this too good to be true? Does this make sense? But essentially, there is no place where consumers can go to get accurate information and get honest information about the risks of new technology, new procedures.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and kind of what you said earlier. Um, these med spas or doctors' offices, cosmetic surgery centers buy these machines that are really expensive. And, their incentive is they need to make their money back, and not only make their money back, but these are huge money makers for these practices. I mean, you talk about CoolSculpting. some of these places charge, thousands of dollars, and they try to sell you these packages and say you need multiple, you need a bunch of these, you need a bunch of rounds. And, before you know it, you're paying as much to undergo something like CoolSculpting. You could have just gone and had plastic surgery and paid for that to have, whatever the problem area is fixed. So, um, the doctors don't really have an incentive to really tell you about these risks, or if they do, I think a lot of times they're really minimalized. You might have a patient who comes in and says, well, what about this? And obviously they're going to tell you, oh, that's super rare, that never really happens, or we've never seen that here. It really is unfair for the patient who is, we're just relying on what they're being
They
told when they go into
trust.
these offices, and they don't realize that they need to go out and do their own independent research. And maybe if they learned this information, they would say, "Ooh, I don't want to do that. I'm gonna skip out on this one." So, in terms of, being able to bring a lawsuit against anyone currently for CoolSculpting, I mean, it sounds like it's a pretty tough road at this point to try to bring something against the manufacturer. Is there the potential to bring a suit against the actual medical provider, or the provider that gives out the treatment? What are options for people who might have this done and then, ultimately develop PH?
If your provider was negligent in the way that they sold you or informed you about this procedure, if they never told you about pH, which we know is like one of the most serious adverse effects that should have been discussed, or if there was no licensed healthcare provider involved in the entire transaction, right? If it was just some tech that they put on this device and you didn't even have an opportunity to discuss anything about this procedure with an actual licensed healthcare provider, you definitely have a claim against that CoolSculpting provider. Now, this is not going to be products liability. It's not going to include the manufacturer, but it's going to be either medical malpractice against a healthcare provider or a regular personal injury case against a person that provided it to you without a license, right? Without a medical license. I think that that is something that, people should think about doing. I don't think they have too much recourse against the manufacturer at this point. But if there was negligence, there is responsibility that falls on the providers. The providers are the ones that are advertising also this product to them, to consumers, and they're making money from consumers on this, right? The med spa industry is a business. And I think there's a bigger message here, right? It's the fact that healthcare providers are getting into the field of aesthetics because it is a cash business. And it's a pretty sexy business, right? You can make a beautiful Instagram and dance and sing on there and sell beauty. And what I'm seeing in my practice is that these healthcare providers are forgetting that what they're doing is providing medical services. They're not, this isn't a hair salon or, a cosmetologist office where you're just getting a facial. And people need to take it more seriously. I think healthcare providers need to step back and remember that their first and foremost duty is to their patients, and they need to inform them and sit down and discuss the risks in a very serious and honest way. And if that means that your patient wants to go home and think about it, I think that's the ethical thing to do rather than push packages on them, pre-sell many different procedures that may not be right for that patient, right? So I think
Mhm.
CoolSculpting is just one of the stories, but I think there's many products and procedures that have a similar story of providers just pushing them on consumers, and consumers are just trusting that they're going to get a great result without any consequence or risk.
Yeah, I think 1,000% you're right on all of that. And I think, kind of like what you were just saying, a big problem today is how, these med spas and plastic surgeons are marketing a lot of these things online, and, making it seem like it's no big deal, and like it's just, some easy peasy thing that I'm going to go in and do. And even if it's a full blown, really aggressive, invasive, dangerous surgery, like something like a BBL. I mean, you see the way that some of these doctors are advertising it to the patients, and it's being made like it's just this glamorous, sexy, fun thing that, I'm going to go down to Miami and get a BBL over the weekend. And people just don't know that this is a major serious surgery, or just even things like cosmetic injectables. There can be very serious risks associated with all of these different things. And I think that marketing is a huge problem there, and people just not really understanding that this is a medical procedure. This is a medical device that someone is about to put on my body. We don't even know to ask questions about, well, is this person licensed or trained, or should they be using this laser or this machine? And so that kind of segues into the next topic that I wanted to talk to you about, which is the unlicensed practice of medicine that is going on in
Oh,
med
yeah.
spas. And you just mentioned, I know you've seen lots of this going on. And you just kind of mentioned it with the CoolSculpting that, it might end up being just some tech or some person in there. So can you just kind of give us a little bit of information on, what is considered a medical procedure or a medical device that a licensed medical professional should be providing versus maybe someone who is just like an esthetician or a
Mhm.
tech? Can you kind of give us a little bit more information about that?
Yes, I think that is so important to let people know that there's a huge difference between an esthetician. I don't care if you call yourself a medical esthetician or esthetician with an E versus an A, right? Estheticians are not licensed healthcare providers. They do not have a license to practice medicine. However, there are so many new products on the market, especially devices such as lasers, radio frequency devices, microneedling, things that penetrate either with energy or with an actual physical, like needle, penetrate the skin. And essentially in Florida, we have a code that says cosmetologists who would be considered estheticians, and facial specialists, they are not permitted to do anything that permeates the skin. Microneedling is absolutely beyond the scope of their practice. The only thing they should be doing are facials, light chemical peels, and microdermabrasion, which is like sandpaper, a type of device on your skin. Anything that permeates the skin is medical practice. It is important for people to understand, like sometimes I'll have a case with laser hair removal and serious burns and scarring because the person that performed it didn't know what they were doing or did not assess the patient properly. Well, there are people that are representing themselves as laser specialists or laser techs, right? And in Florida, for example, we have a law that says a physician, a licensed physician, must meet with you and consult with you before an electrologist can do laser hair removal on you. And electrology, I know that the medical community will differentiate between electrolysis and laser hair removal, but under Florida statutes, it's all the same. And so in Florida, we are required to have a physician meet with the patient because it is a very serious procedure, right? These are very dangerous devices. They can hurt a person if they're not set properly. And so we're seeing a lot of unlicensed health, non-licensed healthcare providers like estheticians using very serious devices like radio frequency and lasers. But there's also an underworld under that of maybe communities of people where they prey on maybe undocumented people or people who don't speak English very well, and they will get products from overseas, China and Brazil, knockoff injectables, knockoff devices, and they will do these procedures with these very dangerous and God knows what they are. And so I have a case right now in litigation where this woman trusted someone with laser CO2 laser device, and she burned her face and she burned other parts of her body with it. And it's a very sad situation because the person was not only unlicensed, they got this device from AliExpress.
That's absolutely terrifying. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, the counterfeit, I think, products and devices, that's a whole separate, we could probably spend a whole nother episode talking about that. That's definitely something that we all need to be watching out for. And I know that recently there was a warning that just came out from the CDC talking about counterfeit Botox products that are, causing women to get sick. And so I think
Hmm.
counterfeit products is something that people have been talking about a lot lately. And, I think that all comes back to, you know, you just put your trust in this provider and you're relying on them, but you don't know where they're getting their products from. You don't know where they're buying their machines from. And I think, in a lot of cases, when you're going to places that are offering different services at, some kind of an extreme discount, that should be like a big red flag to say, well, why can you offer this for so cheap when everybody else in town is charging, this amount? And not to say that, more reputable places can't be engaging in some of this as well. So it's really scary. I want to go back. So you just said that devices like RF microneedling devices, and we have Morpheus 8 and different names for some of these different devices. Those would be considered medical devices that
Hmm.
only a licensed medical professional should be actually providing.
Absolutely. So when they are cleared by the FDA tells them that you're allowed to put this on the market. However, these are prescription only, so you can only sell them to licensed physicians. Now, the question is, there are some spas that don't have licensed physicians working there. How do they acquire these devices? It's unclear. Maybe someone, uses their name to sign off and for a fee. However, the public should understand that these devices can only be purchased under federal laws by a licensed physician. So if you have an unlicensed tech using them, you have to ask, are they allowed to be using it? Are they supposed to be using it? Now, for a doctor, it is very, I think, profitable to have a tech or just a medical assistant using these devices. They'll teach them how to click around, and they're very like user friendly nowadays. They have screens and you can put in different settings and just start using them on people. However, these non-medical techs that are using these devices, they don't understand the nuances of different skin color, right? And different hair color and what you need to do in order to make sure that you're safely treating a person. Yeah, these medical devices are only supposed to be sold to doctors. It's unclear why they're sometimes end up in the hands of people without any medical license.
And I think, again, going back to people not understanding that these are medical devices that can cause very serious problems if they're not used properly. I've seen cases with really significant scarring, and I'm sure you've seen, probably all kinds of things. And I just think that, again, people just don't know. It's advertised to us like this is just some easy peasy aesthetic thing that I'm going to go in and do. And if we are not researching and really making sure that we're going to the right providers, people that are licensed and trained on how to actually use these devices and machines, really, really bad things can happen. And I think
Yeah.
it's really hard, especially nowadays, to find the information. So, do you have any advice on how, if, and right now I'm just talking about, med spas, that kind of setting, is there anything that we can do to sort of vet the credentials of a med spa provider before we go in and have a service done?
Yeah, I think there are some things that are basic things that you can do. First of all, I would say do not make an emotional decision on who you want your provider to be. So I know that there's a lot of, Instagram marketing where the person's like really cute and funny and they're pretending their lasers are guns and they're, doing cute videos. And so you're like, I like the person. I want to go there because it looks like fun. But remember, these are lasers that are going to be sending energy through your skin and into your tissue, right? So you have to approach it like a medical procedure and as if you are choosing a medical provider for a real health issue. So if you have some kind of a health issue that you can't resolve on your own, you go to find a specialist and you research them because you want someone with the highest education and the most experience, right? So why are you not doing the same thing for your aesthetic needs? What I would say is take the emotion out of it. Check if you like someone on Instagram, that's fine. I'm on Instagram, you're on Instagram, right? However, do they have a legitimate website? Does their website have a legitimate biography about the provider? Do they have the provider's face? Do they have the provider's credentials? This is something I do in researching potential defendants. When a client comes to me, the first thing I do is I look at how this person is presenting themselves to the world and how transparent they are about their credentials. So if you can't figure out like who is this person, are they a nurse practitioner, are they a PA, are they a physician, or are they unlicensed? That's a red flag. Another thing I would do is check multiple sources. Don't just check like Google reviews. Check realself.com. Check different things, maybe deeper down into the depths of the internet, because some reviews, especially with very good marketing teams, can be hidden or can be muddied up with good reviews. So and look at the substance of the negative reviews. I understand lots of businesses get unfair negative reviews. However, some have real substance to them. And so I would really pay attention to how you're feeling about the overall picture, not just how great their Instagram feeds are, right? And of course, you can always check on the medical board's website, right? Are they currently licensed? Do they have any complaints? With physicians and PAs in Florida, the Board of Medicine regulates those professions. With nurse practitioners, the Board of Nursing regulates those practitioners. So do some extra checks before you book that appointment. And then when you go into your appointment, listen to how they're discussing the procedure. I think that's another opportunity to either avoid something horrible or pick a really good provider. If they are being honest with you about the risks, and if they're telling you, yes, there's other alternatives, and one of the alternatives is just leave it, right? That is a good provider. If the provider's like, this never happens, don't worry about it, I do this all the time, this is not a substantive disclosure of what you should consider as a patient. I don't care how many times you've done it, never had any issue. I care about what independent information is out there that you should tell me that I should consider, right? Have you read the medical literature on it? Do you understand what other providers are reporting, what other providers in the community are seeing, right? And I think if the provider is not willing to devote too much time on the risks, then that's a red flag too. And you are totally in your right to say, let me think about it. Don't sign up for anything. I know there's a lot of pressure. That's another red flag. Pressure to sign up for a package, right? Sign up for a package today so you can get unlimited Botox or unlimited fillers. Here's actually
The deal's going
credit.
to expire if you don't do it right now.
Or if the objection is, hold on, I'm not sure I have that kind of money for a package. Here's care credit. We can sign you up today with a bank so you can prepay, right? That's another red flag. Go home, really think about it, but don't go in until you know what you're getting done. Do your own independent research about the procedure. So there's many things how we can be responsible for our own well-being, right? However, a lot of people I think skip it and just trust, and I don't think that's, very responsible to yourself.
Everything that I'm learning, and all the different topics that I've been looking into, we can't just blindly trust, especially when it comes to an industry that, as you said earlier, is solely for profit. Like this is these surgeons and providers. I mean, yeah, there is an element of it where it's, you want to help people fix insecurities and feel better about themselves, and there's that whole aspect. But at the end of the day, these are not medically necessary procedures. This
Mhm.
is this is a money-making industry. It is a cash industry, and we have to really, really do our due diligence and our research so that we can protect ourselves and make sure that we are making the best decisions that we can for our health and for our bodies. So thank you so much for sharing all of this information with us. If anybody wants to learn more about you, if anybody has a case, what type of cases are you typically interested in taking, and how can people find more information about you?
So we are a Florida law practice, and we focus solely on cosmetic procedure injuries. And that is a big range of different types of situations, from unlicensed practice of medicine to even medical malpractice against cosmetic surgeons and plastic surgeons. That is all we do. And if you think you have a case, so many people don't realize that, can I file a lawsuit against a med spa or someone that botched me? And usually the answer is yes. If there's negligence and you have significant injuries, it is something worth investigating. So you can find us on mylawadvocate.com. I'm also on Instagram, LouLawESQ. But yeah, I hope everyone stays safe and stays beautiful, and stays responsible for themselves, does their own research. So
Yes, absolutely. We all need to do our research. So, all right. Well, thank you so much for being here. This was so informative and so insightful. And we will definitely add your information to the show notes so that everybody can find your law practice and more information about you. So thank you so much for being here. This was
thank
fun.
you.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of the Beauty Justice Podcast. For more content like this, follow along with me on Instagram at BeautyJusticeWit. If you want to switch to toxin-free makeup but you're not sure where to start, get my free guide, Clean Up Your Makeup, today by clicking the link in my bio or visiting my website at beautyjustice.com. I'll see you next time. The contents of this podcast are for informational and educational purposes only. Nothing you hear should be construed as legal or medical advice.